Yes, we can. Did we get it? Ah, here we got it. We got it. We good. We good. Let's see. Let's, yeah, while we wait, get everything up and running. Yes. Dun, 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 dun. Greetings, salutations. How does it feel? How does it feel to be right on time with T Nathan? Greetings, salutations. Y'all know what time it is. Ah, I rewatched the first episode tonight. Oh, you did? All right. Well, you know we're here. You know what we're gonna get into tonight then. I'm trying to get into it early because are we watching 28 years later tonight? Are we doing? First mod here. Let's see, today is Thursday. What's up? What's your schedule today, Jay? You're gonna be working the third shift. I'm tired of waiting on y'all. I want to watch 28 years later. You at home? Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, Rain was here before you, Jay. All right. All right. Well, y'all know what time it is. Let's kick off the intro.
Conversations with TNathan delves into the stories of activists, scholars, and everyday heroes who have fought to continue the fight for justice, equality, and liberation. Not only will he educate and inform, but also empowers listeners to become active participants in the ongoing fight for justice. Every night at 11 Eastern on the GCPR network.
Y'all see it. Y'all see it. Y'all know it's true. Y'all know it's true. Welcome, welcome. Conversation with T Nathan on the GCPR network and on here on TikTok. And you know where else to find me at. Yes. You like the intro? Ah, yes. I just started to use it. I've been had it. I just started to use the intro because I was like, hey, I got an intro. Oh, I got an intro created for me. So I don't know. I might use it as an intro and an extra. I don't know. Depends on how it goes. But yeah, we got that going. Greetings and salutations, everyone. How are you all doing tonight? Give y'all a couple of give the people who want to catch up a little time to get here. We're going to be continuing our second night of our coverage of Katrina. I would do two every night, but I figure with commentary by me already, they already get stretched out to an hour. But uh, yeah, yeah, I'm always on time, Rain. How dare you insult my? Oh, I cannot. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Yes. I'm always on time. I'm always on time. What's up, PK? What's up, PK? Greetings, salutations, everyone. How y'all doing tonight? Y'all know who it is. It's T Nathan. It's a conversation with T Nathan. Don't act weird. Don't act weird. Don't act weird. Yeah, that was my three words. Those are my three rules. Don't act weird. Don't act weird. Don't act weird. Uh, yeah, because when you act weird, yeah, we don't let it go. We don't let it go here. Yeah. If you're on time, I also have 20/20 vision. Listen, Jay, don't be bragging about your eyesight. I know you're in here bragging about your eyesight. We don't need you to brag about your eyesight. You understand? You understand? Don't hate. Don't hate on my on-time nature. Do not hate on my on-time nature. It is what it is. Okay, fine. There we go. That's what we're gonna do tonight. So understand. recap from the day. You know, tomorrow is supposed to be D-Day. Donald Trump's tariffs are supposed to go into effect on August the 1st for all the people who, all the countries that have made tariff deals with him. Stock market, it's so interesting to hear when the stock market is flying high. I get Kevin O'Leary out here talking about Donald Trump knocking it down. When it goes down, he's like the stock market is not indicating of the economy. It's a struggle. It's a struggle. It's funny. So um, Christian Smalls has finally been released by Israel. He was the last of the two of the 19 individuals that were taken into custody aboard uh, the ship, the Handel ship, Handela flotilla that was taking much needed supplies to Gaza. Of the 19 that was taken into custody, he is one of the last two to be released. I still haven't heard of him. I was going to watch an interview he was doing, talking about his experiences being taken into custody and beaten and choked by his IDF. Surprised the black man would get beaten up and choked. Surprised. But Chris knew what he was doing. Chris knew exactly what he was doing. Not going to happen after the appeal. What's not going to happen after the appeal? Did I miss something? Did I miss something? No. What I miss? Sad part is, I'm blind as hell. I, I thought you had the surgery. My bad. I thought you had the surgery because you were comparing your sight to my being on time. And since me being on time is an understood given, I thought you had LASIK surgery recently. Yeah, but what did I miss? Not going to happen after the appeal. What's not going to happen after the appeal? What appeal are we talking about? What did I miss? Yeah, I got some time. Yeah, yeah. I get people to realize their reality has nothing. I don't know what it has to do with me. U.S. Appeals Court scrutinizes Trump use of tariffs as trade deadline looms. Tomorrow is August the 1st. I guess you missed the point also of taco, what taco means. Um, yeah, U.S. Trade Court of Appeals has been scrutinizing these trade deals, these non-existent trade deals. I was going through the trade deal he made with the EU, and you know what I realized when I'm going through this is that number one, it has no teeth. He, there is there is no enforcement mechanism in any of these trade deals that he's talking about. There's no enforcement mechanism. There's no penalties or anything. It just sounds good, I guess, to gaslight the American people. But yeah, the U.S. Court Appeals Court is not the one that has any jurisdiction over the trade deals. It's the International Trade Commission. But anyway, at the end of the day, it still will not interfere with a sovereign country's right to make bad trade deals. Still doesn't interfere with it. And like I said last night, who is surprised that what is it? What is your schedule looking like normally? My schedule looks like I'm answering your text while I am on my show. So everybody can hear me, read your text, and then answer your text. Look, I know you're some as you up at the crack, as crack of dawn. Yeah, who was it? Oh, Jacoby. Jacoby. Yeah, yeah. What does my schedule look like so we can have a conversation? I have Listen, y'all remember George was in the live last night when I got off. George and I talked on the phone from the time I got off to like I was going ready to go to the gym. George and I stayed on the phone for over 3.5 hours last night talking about a new server. And I'm thinking about he was telling me how to get a server so I could have a server for my family and the people that want to be a part of the bootleg movie night. that we can have an independent server and you don't necessarily. He talked to some good stuff. He told me some good stuff. Me and Unc are the only ones in the time zone of. No, Rain is in the same time zone. Aren't you in the Rain? Aren't you in our time zone? San Antonio. What's up, Dave? Hey, Dave. How is your representative down there? Is she still in trouble for her husband's actions? She still what they still trying Democrats still acting like weak ass bitches down there? Yeah. Garcia is her husband got picked up for having possession of a weapon in a car with a controlled substance and false ID. But yet, literally, it's his wife's ID, and it has to do with her subscriptions for medicinal THC. So, yeah, it is what it is. It is what it is. Democrats. That's what I tell you. That's why I will. Democrats are weak to me because Democrats can't draw the line between understanding the scope of what they're doing and this moral high road that has no impact except to make sure they don't get office. I want to ask you about nonprofits. You know, every text you send me, I'm reading on the air. I want to ask you about how nonprofits typically use consultants. They pay them. See, I multitask. Y'all get to anybody. You can come in the live and hear my responses to your texts in real time. Yeah. Um, it is what it is. But tonight, like I say, tonight we're going to get into the second episode. I'll stop texting him while he's live. TikTok suppresses your bad for speaking truth. Yes, they do. But that's why I say it is never up to the revolutionary crowd can never depend on the establishment to circle my main TikTok page. The revolutionary crowd can never depend on the tools of the oppressor to circulate our message. We must take it upon ourselves to search them out. Like I say, I'm here every night, Monday through Tuesday, 10 o'clock exactly, regardless of what the family says or if the shade of my skin. 10 o'clock exactly, Monday through Friday, 10 o'clock Central Standard Time, 11 o'clock Eastern Time. I'm live here. My videos, you can find them everywhere on other platforms. The ones you can't find on this platform because this platform sometimes gives me a community guideline violation. Have they violated my last video yet? Anybody know? Let me see if they violated the last one I just uploaded. Oh, I'm still up there. Not yet. They haven't violated yet. All right, let's get it. Tonight, episode 2, we're talking about Hurricane Katrina. For those of you all who, this is episode 2, worst case scenario. We're spending a couple of days doing a documentary on Hurricane Katrina. That's what you see up here, down here. And I'm going to address questions and misinformation still 20 years later people have um, about Hurricane Katrina. So let's get it. Oh, let me first, let me get, now, I don't know, what should I do first? Let's start this while I address this big thing on my screen. Greetings, everyone. Welcome.
How you doing, man? I had to leave out of my house, man. I don't know whether that water's coming over that levee or what.
The last I heard, it's not.
So you haven't heard about that water coming over that levee from the lake?
No, check it out.
Because the water started rising so high on my two-story apartment, I had to get out, man.
Where's that at?
Right across the North Robinson overpass.
Okay, I'm gonna go down and check it out, though. Any word on the levee? Do you know anything about the levee? Is it gone? Is it good? Some dude just came up to me and said, like, water's up to his apartment in the second story. So I'm gonna go check it out.
Jay, go over to the other place and see if I'm still live. See if they put a restriction on it yet.
911 emergency.
Over there and let me know if I'm still live.
Are they trapped in a house? Yes, they are. They're trapped in. Oh, God. She's trying to get on the table and can't. Hi.
We're like under 9 feet of water here. We're trying to get out. We have a baby. There's 5 of us. We're very frightened.
Oh, God, please let us stop.
Pray for me, huh?
Oh, sir, I will pray. I'm going to have to pray for everybody, even myself.
That morning after Katrina, everything changed that day. My house was in the 8th ward, almost the beginning of the 9th ward. We were right on the railroad tracks across from the canal. And we're like right on the levee. My place was on the 2nd floor. My daughter, my niece, my uncle, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, that we affectionately call Bump Bump, they all stayed with me. We had rain, and we had thunder, and we had all the things that make up a storm. But we heard something that sounded like an explosion. I guess that was the levees breaking at that time. That's when the water went from the tire of the car, and I mean the bottom of the tire of the car, to the 2nd floor within like 20 minutes.
The water was steady rising and rising. I look outside and noticed that it was flooding. Well, you know, we know the drainage systems is bad down here. So I started getting worried.
The water started coming in different. The water started changing colors. Actually, we even saw fish in the water when it first started coming, but the water got higher and higher.
We got up this morning, and we just went and rained, and all of a sudden the water just started rising.
The water started rising faster and faster. We went back in the command post and said, this thing is a lot worse than we thought. And at the time when this was happening, we didn't really know the cause.
Water came up. In 3 minutes, it went from the ground to the roof.
I said, where is water coming from? We realized this is not a normal hurricane aftermath. Something's wrong. Something's wrong.
It came in like a tidal wave. Car lights started popping on as the water got higher. You know, we were wondering when it was going to stop.
When I looked out the window and I saw the cars starting to be swallowed, I said, oh well, I've lost everything. Once the water came into the house, you know, there was nothing else that could be done. The water was just inching up higher and higher and higher. It reached a good 6 feet inside of the house.
It's a disaster. The houses down here are destroyed. I've never seen nothing like this before.
My mother's 83 years old, so I don't know how well she made out.
Water's in the house. Yes, it's in the lower ninth ward.
The calls started coming in. It was almost at one burst. And you could hear the emergency because all of the phones started going off at the same time. Folks from St. Bernard Parish and Plaquemines Parish. And then we started getting the calls from folks in the lower ninth ward. There were so many people with the same issues trapped. And the lines were furiously busy.
Please, I'm begging you, we can't stay here. I can't breathe, my daughter can't breathe up here.
We were asking folks what their addresses were. And in finding out, it didn't matter what your address was because the force of the water had moved homes off of their foundations.
It was so much water. You know, it was just like opening a faucet. It's just pouring in. And the house was knocked off of its foundation. So the house was teetering. So we're all signaling to each other, you know, wait, don't move. Don't move. You stay on this side. You stay right there. We're level right now. Then as the water would move the house, we had to adjust. We were like, okay, you go by the front door. You go there. You stay here. Everybody had their own portion of something to this recipe of survival. And then we start hearing barrels from off the railroad track or wherever they came from. And they're hitting the stairs. And we thought the neighbors were dead or dying downstairs.
The water, it's moving at such a fast rate. I could see the water running in through the baseboards, under the door. You're looking at your life, the life that your parents provided for you, your belongings being ruined. Your mother's furniture that she prided is being thrown against the wall. Your ice box or refrigerator is floating. You move things to a higher level. You get as much in the attic.
I just want to address something. I understand what you mean, Jay. This is not the coddle zone. I'm sorry. This is not the coddle zone. These people live through this. This is not the coddle zone. If this is too much for you, this is not the airport. At the end of the day, I think we have accepted the bar is so low on other people's trauma, secondhand trauma, when the people who go through this and live through it to tell their story are the ones that deserve our grace and trauma. I'm not really getting this. People watching something that didn't happen to them. Like Portia and I lived in this area, and yeah, if this is traumatizing to you to watch these people tell their stories of their what they went through, then you're in the wrong live. Like I say, this is not the coddle zone. This is not the coddle zone. Um, go drink some water somewhere else. At the end of the day, I'm tired. It's like my ancestors went through trauma on a regular basis, and to hear some of you all want to be coddled for watching other people go through trauma, we don't have that type of energy here. All right. So let's get back.
As you possibly can. But when you go towards the front of the house and you realize that
And Prophet, that is the reason I'm doing this, because you'll notice the last night we went through the truth and how people have made themselves out to be the heroes or made other people out to be villains, and we can go to the truth. And that's why I like this documentary, because it's people telling their stories in their own words, and we get to dissect the lies that were told for 20 years about what happened after Katrina.
that water is at least that high in the street or higher, then you're worried about an exit plan. You got to get out.
So it's safe to say that house is history. It's gonna burn down to the water line. If I have a hard time picking that one up on the camera, okay, I see it behind the trees.
We were at the Lake Marina Tower, just right on the other side of 17th Street Canal. And me and firefighter Gabe King and Captain Paul Helmers were watching the winds on the south side of Lake Marina Tower.
18 stories in the air right now.
Well, I brought my camera with me for obvious reason that it's very likely you will have things that you want to film in a Category 5 hurricane.
Oh wow, the water's getting pretty deep down there. I have to keep an eye on the water and see what it looks like in another 30 minutes.
When you see water coming up that much, at 6 inches every 15 minutes, that's 2 feet an hour. You're just talking an incredible flow of water. So yeah, when I spotted the 200-foot area of water coming through, I was 100% certain of what I was looking at.
It looks like there's a possible levee breach on the 17th Street Canal, right on the angle behind that burning house. I don't see any levee existing there. Looks like it's at least 3 feet higher on the outside. Hey, you want to see it better, Joe? Let me focus in with this.
I was hesitant to make the report because we didn't have a confirmation. But Captain Helmers, he zoomed in on that breach.
Kid, you want to see it better? Watch right here, Joe. Look. And you can see that the 6-foot wall is gone. You can see the water pouring through.
And my heart just sank. So I radioed it in. We have a breach in a levee. I think I reported it from 4 to 10 feet wide at the time. I didn't want there to be any confusion on the other end at all. Everybody knows the implications of a broken levee. The entire city flooding, possibly thousands of people dying, could be the end of the city.
It was apocalyptic.
We all knew exactly what we needed to do. We knew that we needed to get boats, needed to get as many people as we could, as fast as we could, and we knew that there was just a certain amount of time that the people had.
I ran into our fire chief, Charles Parent, and he
Yeah, y'all know y'all don't get through this commentary, and I want you to understand. And I don't think people it's Hurricane Katrina, but the devastation was not only the hurricane itself, but the breaching of the levees took this to another level. And as we go through the series, you will, like we talked about last year, everybody wanted to put the blame on somebody else instead of somebody acknowledging the failure of government in this position. Like I talked about last night, all these plans they came up with the year before of how to deal with a hurricane, but none of them came into the community and talked to leaders in the community, in Mississippi, Alabama, in any of those places. They had never done that. They always had these planning sessions, and I was just at city council meetings all the time, so I knew these things, right? But I inserted myself into them. But they would never. I, I remember Hurricane Pam training session. I remember that. I remember the the little system they came up with. They said we're gonna do on the radio doing that. We didn't listen to the radio. We listen to the radio. If we listen to things, you were not on them. When they talk about police riding through the neighborhoods and on their blow, yeah, that was fine for New Orleans. That didn't happen in Mississippi, um, on the coast. The failure is multiple parts in this, but the thing about it is, it's enough to go around. And if somebody, I just wanted, even Ray Nagel, like I said, I knew Ray Nagel. It's not that I felt like he took a lot of the blame for things that are outside his control. Because let's be realistic, he was just the mayor of New Orleans. He was just the mayor of New Orleans. He had limited resources at his disposal in the first place. Um, and then you also have to take into account who. Listen, if Katrina would have just did what it did without breaching the levees, this would be a different story. it would be a different story. It would be, yes, destruction, a level 3 hurricane. I said it last night. The worst place for one to come is at the mouth of the Mississippi. But the breaching of the level of the levees made this a generational catastrophe. Not just a bad storm, but generational catastrophe. Because it's also what happened afterwards that we get into and we'll talk about that also compounded this. You don't realize how many people didn't come back to New Orleans because they couldn't. They couldn't. A lot of Houston, you find a lot of New Orleaners that were born and raised in New Orleans living in Houston now because they never returned after they evacuated. Because some didn't have the money to return, so they had to take jobs there and support their families. But
He
we'll
said
get
that
back to
he
that.
had 2 or 3 firemen reporting a very large break in the levee. And I questioned him and I said, "Are you sure? What do you mean a break?" And he said, "That's what I said to them."
I was in the communication room in the Emergency Operations Center, and I heard a report come in that the levee at the 17th Street Canal had busted, and that heavy flows of water were flowing into the city. From that moment on, I knew that Katrina was going to be something different. The levee busting in New Orleans was a worst-case scenario, so I immediately called back to FEMA headquarters.
And you all remember, right? Remember the Hurricane Pam evacuation. I don't even want to call it. I just want to call it the Fantasy Hurricane Pam evacuation plan that they came up with. You know what it never took into account? The arrogance. They never took into account. It's like when I think about that plan, when looking back on that plan in retrospect, right? And besides the fact that they didn't come into the community and talk to the community, even the evacuation plans they came up with didn't take into account their own city planning plans that were doing work in the community and certain roads were cut off. Didn't take any of that account. But it was like you had a hurricane evacuation plan without the effects of water in a hurricane. You had a hurricane evacuation plan that assumed that your roads were not going to be underwashed. Y'all know what underwashed is, right? You were assuming that they wasn't going to be underwashed. You assumed that it was just going to be you need to evacuate, and you assumed that the infrastructure would not fail you, and you assumed that the levees would not. Yeah. And don't get to this is that people talk about the levees in New Orleans and around there. I don't think people I don't think people even now to this day realize how intricate a part the levees of New Orleans are to its survival as a city that was carved out of the swamp. But the cold coast, the south of Mississippi and Louisiana, used to be underwater. All- People don't realize that man-made beach that everybody's always wanted to go to, that 26 miles of beach along the coast of Mississippi, it's man-made. That is not a natural occurrence. That is not a natural occurrence. These are not naturally occurring geological features to these areas because they were underwater. So what the idea that we look back and it's like so surprising that you all that they didn't take these things into effect. It's like, why isn't the water reclaiming these layers? Because you have worked to keep the water out of its natural environment. And that's also what went to the failure of the planet.
To alert them that there are reports that a levee had broken. I can't confirm it, that's just what I had heard.
Yeah.
My tone at the time was, I think, real concern.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you what we're not gonna do. So I'm about to piss me the fuck off. I'll tell you what we're not gonna do. We've set the bounds of this conversation. If you have something you want to talk to me about, I am all answers. But unless you actually have something to add to the conversation that is relevant because you were there on the ground, I, I guess, and I think this is a misconception that people mean well to try to commiserate or to try to sympathize with what we went through, the coast went through in this area. No, I'm not asking for pity or understanding because we're going to give you a breakdown of what happened. I'm not telling you you can't talk in the comment section. No, none of that. But remember that while I say that your trauma is valid for you, but not in my comment section, understand that people are going to respond that were there differently than people who are just watching it on the outside, and respect that. This is not, I think sometimes y'all misunderstand me. I don't create echo chambers. I don't mind dialogue that is helpful in some kind of way, but this is also not a panel discussion. And I have the last word because it's not a democracy either. So I'm doing this to help you all learn from a distance by those of us who were on the ground doing work there or lived through it, and to talk about. And I'm doing this not just because we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of it, but we're also in an era of climate change, and the devastating storms that are going to be hitting the United States going forward along coastal communities are going to disproportionately impact marginalized communities because a lot of the people that live in these communities are marginalized communities. As we watch sea levels rise, coastal towns are going to be hard hit. And in coastal towns are the highest population of transitory workers and um, minority groups and poor people. All right. So that's also why we're doing it. So we're going to have dialogue on that. But as far as this is, we're going to share. I don't share conjecture. You all know that. If I talk about something, it's talking about it from the perspective of what is and not what we feel. But there are people here that are also been deeply impacted by it. But even them, they know my rules are this is not about all the people that can't deal with it. I ask them to leave already. But what we will not do is devolve into some kind of back and forth in my comment section that is not adding to the narrative that we are discussing here. That's a no-no. All right, let's get back to it.
I know that that information then was passed along to others so that they would know. Now, whether they believed it or not, I had no control over. I could only tell them what I had heard, but I hadn't seen any of it yet.
Boy, that's some water, man, pushing through that. That's coming through that, bro.
The mood was.
And that's a good point. I'm sorry. That's a good point, Rain, because I don't think another thing people realize that we're not there, that price gouging was happening. And that's why I mentioned last night about eminent domain is one aspect of government's function, local government also. But they could have stopped the price gouging by taking over the resources themselves and making sure that they were paid a fair price after the fact to distribute those resources, because if gas prices weren't high because they didn't have gas prices were high just like other resources. Water, I'm gonna tell you, we had truckloads of water bought in, and I caught people selling bottles of water, not bottles, bottle of water for $5 to $6 to people who had no running water, had no water to drink. We didn't even get to the meals that we had to get out in that time. We haven't got to meals, but people were coming into the area selling water to people for $5 and $6 a bottle. And some of them got their water taken from them. Yeah, we did. So, hypothetically speaking, some of them probably got their water taken from them and distributed to the people.
Kind of easy.
And hypothetically speaking, anybody that was involved in taking their water didn't feel anything about it.
In the beginning, at least we did have some shelter. But things started deteriorating real fast.
Storm coming through the dome. But that water is trying to get in there for real.
The only light we really had if you went inside the Superdome was from the 4 holes in the rooftop.
Of course, they have emergency generators, but no air conditioning. So that's going to be obviously an interesting situation as the morning progresses.
Started getting more muggy, and it was really hot, steamy.
It's getting hot in there. The toilets are overflowing.
All the bathrooms got flooding everywhere to the time, man. It's nasty already.
The smell was getting worse. People was kind of like closed in, and it just wasn't good. So we went on the outside where we could congregate and where people had radios.
Hurricane Katrina hitting the Big Easy very hard today.
And as the day was going on, it was having more and more reports.
Police and fire said there was a breach at the 17th Street Canal.
All you see is water, pretty much, and the tops of roofs.
A significant part of the city is underwater. A significant part of the city is damaged.
What you hear are people screaming for help.
They have confirmed reports of...
Now, listen. Mac, like I say, and this is another thing that the levee breaching. Now, the one, like I told you, the Superdome was I don't know, and I know the planning for going to the Superdome had been in place for a long time. You just never think about it. You never think about it because but the planning of going to the Superdome was horrible on so many levels. People assume, and this is for people who had been in the Superdome to games in the rain. We knew that a very hard rain or if something happened, that there will be water in the Superdome. If you had gone to Saints games, I know people were focused on the fact that we had bags on our heads and when we were the Aints, right? But if you had gone to the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, I say that name for a reason like that, you knew that water would leak through the ceilings. It was a running joke. It wasn't ever because you didn't experience the kind of rainstorm like Katrina, but there have been more hurricanes. Katrina wasn't the first hurricane to pass through Louisiana or New Orleans, and it was the first Category 3 storm in the modern era that did. But there are other storms that produced enough rain that they also had to go into the Superdome after the storm, and tiles had fell. They did clean up because it was wet in there. That's why I said. But then that still wasn't the worst part. The worst part is when the levees breach, the Superdome is at a low point in New Orleans. It's not a high point, it's a low point. And where were people sleeping at in the Superdome when the levees broke?
Bodies floating.
We didn't see water yet, so we just hearing all of these horror stories. And call after caller, call after caller, call after caller. They couldn't get to the people. You just really.
And another thing, let's talk about. Yeah, I told you, you're gonna get commentary, but let's talk about the fact that when we mentioned the bodies floating, New Orleans, you're buried above ground. Buried above ground. Why? Does anybody know why you're buried above ground in New Orleans? Why New Orleans has mausoleums and they don't dig? Most of the South. Goes back to the fact you're from a swamp. So even when you got the swamp out, you still had your water table was diggable. You could dig to the water table in Louisiana and on the coast of Mississippi. So you would be digging into water. But also understand that these cemeteries, the mausoleums was above ground, but their foundations were not like inundated against rocks and water, even concrete foundation. The best mausoleums that were still standing were the ones that had the steel rebars driven into the ground deep to form some kind of stability against the shifting water table under. But if you just had people think that you could just go out there and put some concrete down and build you a mausoleum without securing it in a way that was safe, your mausoleum is, and then mausoleums also, a lot of them were made out of brick and not the good brick. The basically the older ones were made of mud brick that had been sun-baked. So now you have this sun-baked brick underwater for an extended amount of time. And grandpa came home. That was one of the things that was played down. The number of bodies, they mentioned the number of bodies, and that was one thing that threw the count off too, about the number of bodies that they, first said initially. That's why they had adjusted, but it's still because a lot of the bodies that were floating out there were already dead from their graves.
They don't know what's going on.
Oh, and I also meant to tell you, and what is the thing about dead bodies that also increase this tragedy? Disease. Disease. A lot of people didn't realize that unlike normal cleanup after water and floods in areas, that by the dead bodies that were introduced to this that had been dead or just still in different decay stages of decay, a lot of people were out in this water with no safety boots on. They were just people trying to get from their home to a shelter as the levees rose, and they were being inundated with disease.
The water was coming up more, and we had 3 non-swimmers, and then we had the swimmers, myself, who's injured, and my daughter and my niece. They were saying, we'll get help. I was like, no, we can't separate. And I can't help you if you go off somewhere. They stayed. I convinced them to stay. And my uncle and I went on the porch. And the Mississippi River and Lake Pontchartrain looked like everything had merged. There were trains floating. My neighbors are gone. I've never felt so isolated to where I just thought the world has ended and we're the only few people that are left. So now we got water tower ankles on the second floor of an extremely tall house. So now we have to move to the attic. Now, mind you, I have a broken neck and a broken back, and I'm in a cast, and I have a brace on my neck. So before we went into the attic, my daughter started writing our names and our date of births on the wall. Just like I'm writing our names and our date of birth, so when they come inside the house and find us, I say, find us? She said, yeah, because Mom, we're probably not going to make it through this. It's, too much. So I erased it off the wall. It's like, girl, we're going to live. We're going to make it through this. I felt hopeless during that time when she was writing that on the wall, but something inside me told me, this isn't it. You got to convince them that this isn't it because they're giving up. If we keep our heads together, we're going to live. We're going to be okay.
It's almost one. And that's another thing. All right. I don't think people know the difference between Lake Pontchartrain and the Mississippi and how big Lake Pontchartrain is. The Lake Pontchartrain Bridge and the bridges that span these uh, these bodies of water are huge. One of the largest man-made suspension bridges was in Louisiana across Lake Pontchartrain. That amount of water and the depth of that water. And you realize the only thing, and I like I say, people don't realize when they're driving through, the only thing that's keeping this water from its natural where it would naturally be at if we wouldn't have had levees were levees. And Lake Pontchartrain is massive. And then to get to that, and you get and say you're talking about the merging of this. When I showed you the pictures and we see how New Orleans and you look at the I-10 expressway is underwater, you know how high that is underwater, and understand it was underwater. Like say, so you have a medium of disease, water everywhere, everywhere. What comes with that? Even and I'll talk about that at the end, but with cleanup, even in these communities, you still gonna have black mold. So the deaths that we attribute to Katrina are the ones that initially took place within that first 7-day period. But there are other deaths associated with this storm that took place after that because of the disease that they didn't plan for. Rescue workers. I don't take any of this rescue. One thing I have the highest respect for is the rescue workers, especially the ones that were jumping out of the helicopters into the water to rescue people. And they wasn't thinking about disease. They were just trying to save people, saving people on the roof of their house. You could watch. You watched trudging along in water. for days. Mosquitoes, especially another thing you don't realize. This is August. This is August when this happens, right? It's hot. So after the storm, anybody who knows anything about being in a storm, what happens the day after the storm? It's a sunny day. It's like it's hot, and this is the South. And what comes? Mosquitoes.
1 o'clock p.m. now. Storm's dying down pretty good. We're gonna go out pretty soon and try to get a boat.
One thing about firemen are going to find a way to do what they need to do. And it's obvious that our job at that moment is to help people who are stuck in the floodwaters and possibly drowning.
There's not a lot of water in that big boat.
We were looking around for boats, and we did spot two on the street. We swam to that building, and we got that boat.
We had some other guys, they could hotwire boats. There was a parking garage, so we went and actually siphoned a lot of gas out of those cars.
This scene was on
And
the
as
news.
soon as the wind died down at 2 o'clock, we launched operations.
And let's give a shout out to the Cajun Navy. This is give a shout out to the Cajun Navy. If you know, you know, because them backwood boys, they got out there and they did their thing. I will always give it up to the Cajun Navy. And they go around now. Every time I'm at a disaster, they were in Rolling Fork, Mississippi last time I was there, and there's no water there. But they come in and they're committed. They're committed to doing what they do. Isn't this the beginning? No, this is not the beginning. Well, like I say, this is after the levees are broken. Right. That's where they came from. Look at these houses, right? Look how this is how much water you have to understand is in this is in the city. This is not just like some outskirt island or something. This is in the city. The fourth ward, the seventh ward, the ninth ward. These places were literally underwater. I'm gonna tell you, that's why I said, and I did say, I said New Orleans will never be back. I said that. If I've ever been wrong about one thing in my life, I can admit at New Orleans after Katrina, after the levees broke, I said it's just not possible. But New Orleans has come back. I love New Orleans. It's one of my favorite cities, but I'm not sure if it's just not postponing the inevitable.
When we started, we probably had 4 or 5 boats that we had commandeered. I told the guys, I said, go find whatever boat you can find. Let's get to work. Once comms went down, it was chaotic. You know, once communications went down, you know, you just went to work. You know, we have that. You got to have direction. Who's going to do what? Who's going to be responsible for this? Who's going to be responsible for that? We never had any of that. Never had access to any of that.
We expected FEMA to come in quickly and that it would be something that would allow the local officials the reprieve.
What did you expect? What did they expect? Now we getting away from the part where I told you that you can't blame the levee systems not being upheld on the Army Corps of Engineers because they basically they created a whole branch of government in New Orleans, a bureaucracy that was the problem to maintain the levees. Army Corps of Engineers, the levee design is spectacular. The levees from 1890, building the levees. If you don't know what New Orleans was like before the levees, when you look at the history of it was a swamp. So the Army Corps of Engineers basically created the technology to build the city in the swamp with 1890s material that New Orleans begrudgingly. And it was like, and that was what's so strange to me. People were blaming everybody else. Like, this is New Orleans Levee Committee's fault because they've never been since. There was a history. If you live in New Orleans, live in the area, you know, New Orleans has a history of corruption in government. That was a history of corruption of using just enough funds to give the appearance. There were cracks in the levees that we knew were there before, and people laughed. People would go down to the levee and be fishing on them, laughing about the cracks in the levee, and that was the history because the commission didn't do its job in maintaining the levee. And also, people would complain. People would complain. Yeah. So,
We've needed for that type of catastrophe. It was obvious that we were dealing with something bigger
all right,
than our
Jester.
capabilities.
Means you were on your own. But we figured it out. You know, we made it. We went and did what we had to do to get to the neighborhoods that we had to get into to try to save people's lives. We set up quadrants. You were a sergeant, you had one quadrant. You took your men, put one officer on every boat, you assigned that quad. And that's how we broke it down. I'm worrying about saving people's lives. That's my job. And that's what the hell, pardon my French, that's what we did. That's what we did.
Here's another thing. There was a marine company. I forgot the name of it. It was a marine company. It was sold boats. It sold boats, and I will give it up. These the Navy people. I don't call it stealing the boats. I didn't call it stealing the boats, but they were after the fact. They were like, "Who's going to reimburse us for the boats?" And people were like, "Nobody," because your boats were basically would have got destroyed if we would have left them tied up to the harbor while the water was dry. They used the boats. They used the boat. I cannot think of the name. They sued. They sued, and they did get reimbursed later, but it was just it was boat marinas. If you live on the coast and you know what a marina is, they were just taking these boats to see these boats basically like using like gondolas like you in Venice in the city. This is diabolical looking at the fact that this is New Orleans and there's so much water in the streets that you're riding a boat looking for people in the community. A boat.
Now, you know, you're hearing things on the radio, but until you see it, you just can't imagine it.
Look at that water level.
23, 32,
It was kind of like a moment that you not in shock, but you're almost like, oh my God, I did not realize it was even though you're hearing things on the radio, you don't realize it's that bad.
It was hot as hell, and you could only imagine
What did
how
I say?
awful it would be if you're
What did
stuck
I
on a
tell
roof.
you?
If you're not in superior physical condition, you probably wouldn't survive that. So yeah.
And there it is. That's the next part of this equation. And this is like we talk about medical apartheid. And you talk about the fact. Listen to them. You got mosquitoes. You got cholera. You got all kinds of shit. And these people are fighting now. This is like I say, look at the day. This is the day after Katrina. Look at, as a matter of fact, it's a couple of hours after landfall the next day. The sun is out, and this is New Orleans, and the humidity level has shot up 100% because now basically, this is basically what the coast is going to look like in 100 years with the rising sea levels. Basically, if you and just think, a lot of some of the deaths that happened in Katrina were because people on diabetes medicine, no electricity. You can't keep you're taking a chance taking your medicine because it's not properly at the proper temperature. You have people that were on oxygen. They didn't have oxygen. A lot of people died also after Katrina because of their existing health care and their inability to get to the hospitals. Number one, emergency rooms at Mercy General didn't exist anymore because they had to move all of their patients up. And then when they were bringing people to those hospitals, they brought them by boat. Just understand this, right? Your whole first floor, first and second floor is underwater. Your, and people don't realize in the basement, they had to make sure the basements were sealed up well to prevent flooding, or they wouldn't have had any power from their generators. But they couldn't refill the generators. So once those generators, while they were still while their floor was underwater, they couldn't get fuel to the generators. All of this was taken into account. Like I say, if you were there and you see these things, it's different than watch people talk about. They don't live in these It's a difference to watch people say, why do you all do this? Or why do you all do this? And I'd be like, why don't you shut the hell up? Why don't you shut the hell up? But this is what you all have to look forward to if you don't learn the lessons that were not learned. In our lifetime, um, up, we time is oh, as we watch these once in a lifetime storms occur, this is what you're gonna get. This is what you're getting. Yeah, we're gonna run a little over. All right, let me get back to this.
It was really important to get people off of roofs as quickly as possible.
Now I'm gonna let them hear a little.
The TAC team started doing their methodical searches, pulling out as many people as we could.
Let me get
To us, it was you get there, get the people on a boat. If they want to go, you take them. If they don't want to go, they're going to stay there because we're not going to fight with them and flip a boat.
How many people y'all got? Good deal, Park. We're in good shape.
You get in a hasty mood. So you're just out there trying to pick up as many people as you can, wherever you can, until you're able to get some solid intelligence.
Some areas, water was 15, maybe 16 feet deep. We would shut off the motor and holler, and someone hollers back, and obviously if someone sees you, we would go very slowly, so, people would have a chance. They'd hear our motor. There was a family on a roof, and we went to go rescue them, and they said, no, not us, the house right there. We can hear a man screaming.
Turns out that he was standing on his tub, and the water was up to his neck, and he didn't have much longer.
The water was halfway up the bathroom window, one of those small bathroom windows, and they broke out the whole window, and they were able to drag him out the window. And so, yeah, they got him out of that house just in time.
How long you think this water gonna stay up here like this?
You know the dire position that these people are in. You got elderly, you got young kids, you got women with children, pregnant women up there. The numbers didn't even come to my mind because I knew people were in trouble. Some people just feel bad because they never had the means to get out. And if they got out of their houses, got in their car, or tried to run, the water was going to take them away. There was no way in the world they were going to survive that. It was absolutely horrific.
Come on.
Well, we were walking around. We went up the street a couple of blocks, and I would say there's nothing like the flooding that we might have anticipated. This was clearly a horrific storm. Clearly, it is going to be a mess to clean up. But, Wolf, they were expecting Armageddon here. Armageddon, it wasn't.
The worst case scenario was that we would be floating atop 25 feet of a highly toxic soup here in downtown New Orleans. That's not the case.
What they were predicting for New Orleans was 175-mile-an-hour winds and a direct hit from Hurricane Katrina. They didn't get that. The folks in New Orleans are certainly lucky.
The city of New Orleans is filling up with water, but all the media was down in the French Quarter. There's no water in the French Quarter.
Now, and that's another thing. And that's why a lot of this misconception comes in at, because Fox News was down in the Fox News was in the area in the French Quarter. And don't forget, water did get into the French Quarter once the levees broke and started rising. But that's what they were telling the world. They were telling the world this because they wasn't in these areas. They wasn't in the areas that are inundated with water, right off of Lake Pontchartrain into downtown. And they were telling them, oh, they expected this and they expected that. And I was like, y'all, I better not get to one of y'all. I better not get to one of them. They broke that levee. Water broke that levee. See, this is another thing. I don't have to deal with conspiracy theories. The disaster broke the levee.
Order?
That is Bienville down the street.
So they're reporting it's not as bad as it seemed. Maybe New Orleans dodged a bullet.
New Orleans indeed dodged what they expected would be a very strong direct hit.
But they didn't know. They didn't know any more than what was in the neighborhood that they were standing in.
There was no water in the French Quarter because anything that is close to the river is at the highest point in the city of New Orleans. So therefore, there's no water.
We're in a bowl. We got the Mississippi River levee over here and the lake levee over here. The city's in the middle. So we are surrounded by water. We're 6 to 8 feet below sea level. And we have some battles with the water staying out. So during the storm, there are sewage and waterboard pumping stations throughout the city that propel the water into the outfall canals. It's a very good system when it works.
Okay, let me address this. I understand. I understand people supplement their belief for reality. Um, who did it hurt? The fact that when you deal with climate change and you're dealing with these environments, yes, they're going to disproportionately hurt um, marginalized communities because those marginalized communities are in the poorest levels of these communities and they don't have to evacuate. But causality and effects are not necessarily linked together. In this case, this was the perfect storm of neglect, corruption, and nature. And that's what it is. See, I don't have to, how should I put stupid humans are not that bright. I know a lot of people create these scenarios in their minds that, it's out to get. No, the out to get you part is the neglect that is caused. These levee systems, this wasn't the first I think people think this was the first time a levee in New Orleans breached. No, this has been a thing. Like you showed you have the Mississippi levees, Lake Pontchartrain. I just explained how big they are. There have been cracks in these levees for decades. This is not the first time. It is the first time of this magnitude because the levee system correct. It was like, yeah, these levees working overtime. You know how powerful the Mississippi and Lake Pontchartrain are, and if you're not doing what it takes to upkeep these levees, eventually, just by sheer nature, when was the first levee built? Do you know how old these levees are? I understand. It's like I can deal in facts. I can deal in facts and show you that you don't have to go by I just believe. I can show you the facts. This is the levee problem in New Orleans. They just heard it on a national level first, but there have been problems with the levee system, and people have been vocalizing it. It's not new. It's just never got to this point where it was strained to the level it was strained to. And if you go back to the year before, they were supposed to pump what was it? What was it, Portia? They were supposed to spend over $1 billion in levee repairs the year before Katrina. And guess what happened? They never got it. They never did.
Please, I heard the boats, but nobody stopped to get it. We hearing all these boats. They're probably getting someone in the area also, ma'am.
You know how much more this is supposed to come up? I don't know how much more, sir. Please go to your attic, sir.
I'm gonna die. The water is steady rising in the attic, ma'am.
All right.
All of us who worked in an emergency operations center
Now listen to
became
this.
the lifeline for people who were calling for assistance, and our resources were stretched beyond measure. There was no playbook written for a disaster and a catastrophe of that level.
By Monday afternoon, there were several reports that levees had busted.
That straight ahead is the London Outfall Canal, if I'm not mistaken. Over there is the greatest break of the levee. Now, there's a huge chunk of concrete you can't even see, but you can see that diagonal piece of concrete.
So I called back to FEMA headquarters. I certainly wasn't informed about any actions that were taking place, and I knew I was the only one from FEMA in New Orleans. And that was the moment where I felt that they couldn't grasp the severity. Nobody ever believes the worst case scenario. I knew at the time that lives were being lost left and right. There were thousands of people on rooftops. My mindset at the time was, I gotta get on a helicopter. I got a little pushback when I talked to the Coast Guard saying, I don't know that we're gonna be able to get you on a helicopter. I informed them that the White House was really counting on me to give them some situational awareness. Not completely truthful, but I just needed to find a way to get on that helicopter because I really needed to put eyes on what was happening.
Now understand, like I said, Katrina hit Monday morning. Understand, this is this is Monday. This is still Monday. Do we understand? I don't know if I'm getting it across. And I also the other thing about the levee conspiracy that we don't need. You don't need the levee conspiracy because um, if you want to be technical, I'll tell you something about your conspiracies about the levees being blown up. If that was the case, you could have blew the levees up anytime. Blew the levees up anytime, and you could have flooded New Orleans. You could go. You could do that now. You don't have to wait for a storm to do it. I just hate you like when people have to tell. Do you understand? The Mississippi River is up here. New Orleans is down here. Lake Pontchartrain is up here. New Orleans is down here. If you really believe in the conspiracy theories that they were trying to wipe out black people in New Orleans, because of just figure this is the time we want to run around and plant explosives in the middle of a storm and blow the levees.
Anybody not believing what I was saying was just going to delay any kind of response. I got on, and the pilot said to me, "Where do you want to go?" And I said, "I need to see how bad this is." We flew out towards Slidell and could tell that the bridge was all damaged and impassable. The airport underwater, that there was no access into the city.
There's our bridge.
We flew all over the city of New Orleans. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before.
And remember, the media was in the safe areas saying, "Oh, they avoided." These pictures came out. I remember um Fox and CBS, because it came to Mississippi too, and they were talking about, "Oh, it's worse here than it is in New Orleans." And I remember saying, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about? It's worse here than it is in New Orleans. New Orleans is underwater." But because they had taken boats, and that's what it is. Did you all just not realize that the causeway has collapsed? The causeway had collapsed. Lake Pontchartrain was underwater. The Pontchartrain Bridge was underwater. There were no ways into New Orleans. Mississippi and New Orleans were no longer connected. They were no longer connected. You have to take a boat. You took a boat to get to here, and you're saying it's worse here than it is. And don't get me wrong, the coast was underwater in sections too. But the coast had more wind damage or water damage that was blown over stuff. But it was just the idea that they were saying that in within hours. Within hours. This is how a lot of these narratives people have are so incorrect because they're basing them off, well, the news said this. Well, listen to people on the ground. That's why I was talking about in here. A lot of y'all were not there and don't understand this narrative because you got your narrative of information. That's why I like. That's why I say I like this documentary because these are the people who were on the ground. What you're listening to is people who were on the ground. People that were looking at these people like, you all lost your damn mind.
And I saw that the actual levees had
Right,
breached in New
Portia.
Orleans. So when we flew to the 17th Street Canal, and you could see.
I think, Siren, a lot of it have to do with wishful thinking and misinformation. I'm not saying that it's not. See, sometimes things can be misinformation, but they're not a plot. They were just telling the story as they experienced it in their limited capacity because just like the city failed to reach out to the community about evacuation plans, the media has a tendency to come in to areas before at this time. They do better now in disasters, but yeah, um, tonight's Thursday, huh? Just hold that thought. Let me finish this thought, and then GCPR, you all got to go. And Jay, are we still on the other station? Someone check the other station out and see if we're still over there. But because we're gonna have to go there too, because I know they're gonna give me a copyright violation. But you gotta understand that the arrogance of some people is the belief that they're seeing everything they need to see. They're seeing everything they need to see. That's one thing about Anderson Cooper I do give it up for. And I also get mad. Sometimes these weather people will be out and stuff. And they're so committed now after Katrina to getting the true story that sometimes you put yourself in a position that you're gonna have to be rescued and then you're taking away resources from those. That's another discussion for another day. But yeah, the arrogance of just believing that a lot of people don't know what New Orleans is either. A lot of people think New Orleans is only the French Quarter, just only the those that the Ninth Ward, the Fourth Ward, all the Seventh Ward. You don't realize that's New Orleans, and if you want to get technical, that was New Orleans before other sections of New Orleans existed because there were wards. Because you know that New Orleans was a port of New Orleans, and it was a cultural center of masters' children that were born of slaves. That's where you octoroons in the whole thing. We can go into that one day if you already want to know. But right now, we're going to get back to this, and GCPR, and you and two, we're out of here for you all. But let me get back to this.
Just this humongous gap in the levee. It wasn't overtopping. It wasn't minor water going over. The levee was gone. I said at the time, 80% of the city looked like it was underwater. It was a guess. It was a pretty good guess. This is it. This is the worst case scenario. We talked about it. It's here.
Like I said, I remember by the time we got there, it was the next day. It was on the 1st of September. Oh, we got there on the 30th.
In the morning, I gathered everybody into the conference room at the Emergency Operations Center.
Governor Blanco.
And I asked them to lay out a map.
Look at Ray Nagel.
And I then proceeded to tell them everything that I had just seen, where all the floodwaters were. I remember looking at Mayor Nagin and seeing a face of disbelief and almost of, what do we do now?
I don't know how to brace you.
I told the mayor, you need to make a list of all of the priorities that you think you're going to need in this environment where